who is sympathetic enough to the Iranian government, works in a place that has direct access to sensitive military operations, and has a history of outward anti-Semitism, Ariane Tabatabai becomes a top suspect. Yet the Biden Pentagon, of course, denies she is a suspect at all. So does that mean she's not going to be investigated? Joining us now to help clear the fog here is Kyle Seraphin, former FBI whistleblower and the host of the Kyle Seraphin Show. He knows a thing or two about what these investigations entail. Kyle, what say you?
I think it's really interesting that she got to stick around. I think it's interesting that it sounds like she got promoted and she moved into places where she would have access to more things. And it should tell people a little bit about the way that the FBI, the DOD conduct what we call counterintelligence investigations, which is exactly what we're talking about here. Interestingly enough, these types of investigations are always long-term, and they're almost always losers for the Americans. I don't know why we do it this way. I don't know why the intelligence services decide that the best way to find people who are giving away classified information is to let them give away classified information, but they do it, and they want to have this proof positive. It's this kind of self-licking ice cream cone we talk about inside the Beltway, where the purpose is actually to have a case open and have something to talk about. So they don't actually care about stopping the transmission half the time, and they will let all kinds of things get through. There's actually an official way to leak classified documents or to allow classified documents to go into the hands of the enemy. They're things that get approved. They're legitimately classified, but they basically say this is no longer important to us. So we're going to let this be something that goes along. And it's called PAM, and it's short for passage material. So this is a legitimate technique that's used all the time. But when somebody is actually just put into a place where they're sympathetic to a regime and they just keep watching them, and you think, when's the takedown coming in? We start getting real full of questions. We know the Biden administration has had three basic main tier threats to American national security. That's the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians. And they've seemed very soft on the Chinese and the Iranians for some reason. They're very, very focused on Russia, which I think in most people's minds is probably not nearly as threatening as the ones that are actively trying to undermine what we're doing.
So, okay, so you bring up a very interesting point, and I know this has been kind of a question that was raised in the back of minds for those of us who've read this. Like, yeah, okay, maybe she is actually on our side and she is passing along this information as you just laid out. But you look at her history and she is very clearly someone who has had deep Iranian sympathies and is very anti-Semitic. Like, she just outright talks about how terrible Israel is. She's made some very inflammatory statements about Israel. Maybe it's part of the cover. Maybe it, is part of the whole shtick. But
or maybe the U.S. government's getting played.
Maybe they're getting played. But then you also pair this up with the fact that she worked, her higher up at the State Department, the special envoy for Iran, had his clearance actually revoked at a very top level. No real explanation. I guess he's under FBI investigation at this point. He recruited her, that guy. So, security clearances have been revoked for way less. She seems to still have a security clearance. How does this work?
Security clearances are one of those things that the federal government has the absolute authority on whether they want to revoke it or keep it, and they can do so under any circumstances. You have no right to a security clearance, and your ability to appeal it is very minimal. I know this personally because mine was revoked for talking to a police officer in the desert while I was shooting on ground I was allowed to shoot on. Meanwhile, you have allegations that would at least make somebody pause from working at their job. You'd usually put them on either a paid or an unpaid administrative leave and investigate them if they're potentially leaking things from the National Geospatial Agency and giving out sensitive information for our allies. Now, Israel's kind of an interesting frenemy in some ways because they sometimes are working with us and sometimes a little bit against us, and people always play on both sides. But at the end of the day, your allegiance is supposed to be to the Constitution, which says that you are going to support what the government says is our friend and our foe and our enemies. We have to be able to know who is who.
For all our viewers asking where One America News is heading in the future, we would like to introduce you to OAN Live. OAN Live is the best way to stay up to date on all of the hard-hitting, straight-shooting, national and international headlines. And the best part is, OAN Live is only $4.99 per month. All the credible, honest, unbiased reporting One America News offers at a fraction of the cost of cable. Just go to OANN.com to easily sign up for OAN Live and stay informed.